So the United States is now becoming a world power. Where is most of our power concentrated? Where do we have most of the countries that we're controlling? What parts of the world? So you can either speak up or answer on the chat. So where are we controlling?
Lots of islands in the Pacific and the Caribbean and Central
Right.
America we also had influence.
Good. So we have a lot of like countries in the Pacific and in the Caribbean. We also have influence in China at this time as well. So Philippines, Guam, Hawaii, and then the Caribbean, we do have Cuba for a while, and then Puerto Rico, and some of the other countries. We also start going into Central and South America, okay? Now, under Woodrow Wilson, we're gonna start to have some conflicts with Mexico, especially with Pancho Villa, and we're going to send some troops in there, Pershing with his camels. If you didn't know that, they had camels in Arizona and places like that for a while. So when it comes to World War I and US and foreign involvement, we're gonna talk about the early part of the war. Did the US want to get involved in the war initially? Were we all about it?
No.
No, why?
We still have that isolationist mentality.
Right, so we were isolationistic. We did not really want to get involved in Europe's affairs. We didn't see it as part of our problem, okay? But were we secretly supporting countries?
Yes.
Yeah, who are we supporting?
Britain, we were sending them weapons on the side.
Yeah, we were totally sending Britain, our homies, weapons on the side. We were kind of like, hey, we don't want like our BFFs to be in trouble, so we're giving them some weapons. What's the ship that got sunk that kind of angered Americans?
The Lusitania.
Right, it was the Lusitania. And what was the Lusitania really carrying? It had something in the bottom of the ship. What would they be carrying that would be like not such a good thing?
Jared said weapons.
Yeah, Jared answered it.
Yeah. Yeah, they had weapons for sure, and they were smuggling them. And then when the ship got blown up, Americans were like, how could you kill all those innocent American lives? Well, because they had weapons illegally too. So we were doing that. Now, at the end of 1915, Woodrow Wilson starts to embark on this policy called preparedness. Okay, so I'm going to put it in the comment column. And I'll put the date too. Wilson actually starts to put together a program to expand the US military. In particular, the Army and the Navy. So while he's claiming neutrality and saying that we're not going to get involved, he's secretly preparing, okay? He's building up our forces, he's getting us ready. And Wilson also has this belief that America is going to become the powerhouse of democracy in the world. He's going to help make the world safe for democracy, and he's going to use this as his platform. He's also hoping that we will become like guiding examples for other countries at the same time. And the progressives were also in support of this because the progressives thought that if we can go and do global democracy, we'll be expanding American idealism. So it's kind of a form of imperialization by helping change the world for better, according to the progressives. Now, when it came back to being at the home front early in the war, America itself divides. Okay, it divides along the lines of people who support Britain and people who support Germany. So what groups are going to support Britain? Who are they going to be? You can answer that. So what groups are going to support Britain?
United States groups or other countries that
United States. This is going to affect how we see things.
People in the United States, they're of North and West European descent, Protestants.
Right. So you're going to talk about the Anglo-Saxon Protestant groups, right?
Mhm.
What groups are going to be pro-German?
The German immigrants.
Yeah. So German immigrants, for sure. What else? There's actually some other groups. Actually, Irish Americans, because why do they not like Britain?
Because Britain has had a terrible history of like just bullying Ireland.
Yes, exactly. So and then at the same time, Britain had gone into Northern Ireland because it's the Protestant versus Catholic religious clash that's happening. So a lot of the Irish Americans were upset with Britain. They didn't like the fact that they were taking them over. And Russian Jews, because at this time we know that there's the Russian Revolution happening. Also, we know that the Jewish populations have historically been persecuted, and they were seeing that in Russia. So actually, Russian Jews also were in support of Germany because they opposed aiding Russia. Does that make sense? So I put that also in the chat. And then there's also a group inside America that is opposed to the war on both sides. Okay, and I put that on there. So these would be things like pacifists. Why are pacifists opposed?
Because it's war and pacifists are all about peace.
Yeah, like the Quakers. They don't want to go to war. So we all like to think of America as a united front during World War I, but I want you to understand that it's actually divided, okay? Especially early in the war. And I'm going to post it in just a second too. Feminists also were opposed, and people who wanted social reform. Okay, so there. Now, for reasons why we start to enter the war, why are we going to enter the war? What do you remember reading about or things in like the crash course? Why did we enter the war?
Like the Zimmerman telegram and the ship thing.
With Lusitania?
Yeah.
What's the other thing the Germans were doing that we didn't like? It goes into
Submarine
the
warfare.
Yeah, right. So we have submarine warfare. And what happened? What did the Germans promise with submarine warfare originally?
They had originally said that they were going to stop it, and then said, just kidding.
Yeah, exactly what they said. Perfect. So we have submarine warfare, where the Germans originally said, we're not going to attack civilians, and then they stopped doing that, and they go back to attacking passenger ships. We have the Zimmerman telegram, and what was the Zimmerman telegram?
Oh, it was from a telegram sent from a German ambassador to Mexico saying, "Hey, if you join our side when we win the war, we'll give you back parts that you lost, territory that you lost during the Mexican-American War."
Exactly. Because remember how I told you Wilson was having conflicts with Mexico. They did not like us. So Germany was trying to use that country right below our borders to help put leverage to help fight us. Does that make sense? So I put on the reasons for the war, the submarine warfare, Zimmerman telegram, sinking the Lusitania. All of those help get the US into the war. All right. Now, when we get into the war, what does the US have to offer for World War I? What do we have to offer?
And we offer just like a bunch of troops to them.
Yeah, what kind of troops? Were they battle like weary troops, or were they fresh-faced guys ready to go fight?
They were fresh. They were ready to fight. They were fired up.
Yeah, so we give them like these fresh-faced young men eager for war. And what was Europe at this time? What were their troops like there?
They were tired of fighting. It went on so long. Trench warfare took a toll on them because it was such a long amount of time for so little progress.
Right, so basically trench warfare turned into a stalemate for European powers, neither side gaining much territory. They've been fighting since 1914. They're tired, they're starving, conditions suck in the trenches. And then we have all these eager beaver Americans who are like, we're well fed, rested, ready to rush the troops, okay? So we send over a whole bunch of these nicely well-trained people. And that does help in some cases because we gave them a fresh injection of troops. We also gave them food and supplies like that they needed to help the Allied powers out. And the US has the economy to help back it up. Does that make sense? Because we haven't been fighting a war. We've been profiting from the war because we've been selling weapons on the side. So we've actually been making all this money. So the US was actually in a pretty good state, okay? So we do help tip the war over. We were in there for less than a year before the war ends. And the global impact of the war is kind of telling. 10 million soldiers were killed. Countless, we don't even know how many civilians were killed. Okay. There's a global famine. And we have the worldwide pandemic of flu. Okay, what do we call that flu, do you know?
Spanish flu.
Yeah. And why is the Spanish flu actually worse in some cases than the coronavirus, do you know?
Less healthcare.
No,
Good.
It killed like 30 million people or something, right?
it did
killed a
kill
lot of
30,
people.
yeah. But the thing with the Spanish flu is that it was extremely virulent and people could be 100% healthy, catch the Spanish flu and be dead in 2 days, 2 to 3 days. It was actually highly aggressive. So the coronavirus, don't get me wrong, is a scary thing. It is important to realize that it is not a very safe thing. However, the Spanish flu was something that we had never seen. And it was pretty horrific. And it did kill 30 million plus people globally. Okay, you can still find pauper graves, which means the people who are too poor to have proper burials or they didn't know who they were. You'll find them all over the place from 1918 from the Spanish flu. It's kind of interesting. And then post-war, what does the US become post-war in the world?
Like a large creditor country.
Right. Good. Becomes a large creditor nation. What does that mean?
Countries owe us money.
Yeah, countries owe us money. So we basically become like a mob bank, right? You owe us or else kind of thing. Who owes us money?
European powers.
Yeah, and how do they do that? So Britain and France owe us money, right? Does that make, you got that part? Germany also owes us money later on. Why?
War operations.
Yeah. So we offered to loan money to Germany to help pay back Britain and France. Okay, so the US will loan money, so I'll write that down too. Because what did Britain and France do to Germany?
They demanded reparations.
Yeah, but like, what were they saying?
That Germany started the war.
Right. Did they start the war?
No.
No. But because Germany was actually the most wealthy country at the time out of like Austria-Hungary and things like that, they made Germany the whipping boy. So now we're going to fast forward just for a second. Germany owes us money. Britain and France owe us money. Okay, so we have 3 countries that owe us money. Great Depression happens. How can Germany pay us money back? Can they?
No.
Can Germany pay Britain and France?
No.
No. Now, can Britain and France pay us back?
No.
No. Basically, it was a house of cards, okay? All these countries owed us the money. They can't pay us the money back. The economy starts to collapse. for all the groups. So it's kind of like this big house of cards. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. What does Wilson propose?
The 14 points.
And what were the 14 points?
They were like about like forming like with the League of Nations or something, right?
Right, so League of Nations is one component of the 14 points, right? And what happens to the League of Nations?
It doesn't do anything in the end.
It
It
doesn't do
sucked.
anything. It did suck because why? What happened? Did it even get up and running?
No, and then as soon as anybody joined it, they would like kick them out.
Yeah, yeah. So Congress denied it, right? There were some European countries that wanted it, but if the US isn't behind it, what will happen?
It'll collapse.
Right. And why did Congress deny it? They said
Because
it'll-
they're afraid of people.
Yes. So we're isolationistic at this time, again, especially among the electorate, and the Congress wants to get elected. Okay. So I put that on the side for you too. So we have US as a creditor nation, Wilson with the League of Nations, that's all post-war, besides the huge devastation that happened. Now, the US is the only country that comes out of it with money. Okay, now we're gonna go to the home front. And we're gonna talk about the first bullet, which is patriotism, okay? What do we know about patriotism during World War I?
Patriotism was at an all-time high. People were ready to go and fight. The fresh faces of the soldiers and everything.
Okay, good. So we do see a rise in patriotism. A lot of the progressives at this time were behind Wilson in the war effort because, like I told you earlier, they were seeing that America helping expand their influence in the world, making it a better place for democracy. But they also said at the home front, it would help with social reforms, okay? And with the social reforms, they were saying that we could show you what a great country we could become. What's important is also at this time, we see large government involvement. So this is really important because before this, the United States government pretty much stayed out of social affairs, and now we're going to see them become very involved. So I want you to know that with World War I, we start to see a large government influence that's just going to expand with scope and power during the Great Depression and FDR, okay? So some of my foreshadowing for you. And then with patriotism, we start doing things like buying war bonds, helping the cause. We're gonna do victory gardens, knitting socks for the war effort. So we're gonna start seeing all of these things happening that are making people wanna be part of the cause. Do we see that today with the pandemic? We do. What are they asking people to make?
Masks.
Right, they're saying, make masks, we need protective equipment for the front line and like people. So we're asking people to start doing these things to help get behind the cause. Stay at home, keep your family safe. We're seeing propaganda commercials on TV with all these celebrities telling you to stay home and stay safe. So I want you to understand that we're still seeing some of these things today that we saw back then as well, okay? And this is really, we see the rise of it during World War I. So there are some committees that are formed to help with this. We see the Selective Service Act in 1917, and this is where men have to sign up. Do we still have it today?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. When you turn 18 years old, men, you have to sign up. It is still around. So when you get your driver's license or you have to renew it at 18 or whatever, they make you sign up for selective service. That's basically the draft. They can use that to draft people. We also start to see the regulation of industry. Does it help if I type the notes up too for you guys on the side?
Yeah, that helps.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Okay, so we see things with the regulation of manufacturing during this time period. Manufacturing will pretty much stop making civilian goods and switch to wartime production. We also see control of transportation, particularly the railroads falling under government control. Labor relations in terms of unions and labor rights are all going to fall under the War Industries Board. They get big names like Samuel Gompers, who was part of the American Federation of Labor. Remember that labor union to help support the effort. So we start to see all these people get behind it. And the important thing of this that we see that comes out of it is we see corporations and government starting to work hand in hand, working side by side. The government will give large payouts to corporations that help the war effort. So that's kind of a benefit to those corporations. Okay. Do we still do that today? What's been Trump been saying during his press conferences? What did he say? Like McDonald's, he started using all these corporations and stuff. They're going to start helping out. So actually Trump is using that playbook. He's saying all these companies are going to help us. Ford's going to make ventilators. GM's going to make ventilators. So they're doing that same thing today where they're going to pay companies to switch from making one thing to another to help that effort, okay? We also are going to have a war labor board that's formed. And the War Labor Board is going to establish minimum wage. Do we still have minimum wage today? Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Do we have 8-hour work days? Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Thank you. And then can you form a union?
Yes.
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 Yeah, you can sort of. Sometimes they block you. So I'll put that there. We also see an increase in taxes. Why are they going to increase taxes?
More money
For what?
Or
for reforms and like just the government.
Well, what are they going to have to pay for? What are we fighting at this time? It's right there. What do we have to pay for?
war.
Yes, war. How much were the wealthiest individuals paying at this time? Do you know? It's going to be pretty surprising. The wealthiest were paying 60% of their income in taxes.
Oof.
Yeah, Wolf is right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the nice thing. After this, after the war is done, so World War I's finished, we come home, all this stuff stops, and it goes back to regular life. So the taxes will decrease, the corporations will go back to manufacturing civilian goods, all of that, okay? But we also have things like the Committee on Public Information, and this is important because this is the propaganda machine. So I want you to know that we have lots of propaganda happening. This is the first time we see large spread propaganda use. And what I mean by this is they were doing pamphlets, posters, they were doing little short ads before movies when you would go see a movie. They were all over the place. They were using propaganda quite heavily to get people behind the war effort and to support it. They were also using it to attack their critics. Okay?
Propaganda was never used that heavily before this.
No, it was not. One reason why is because this is during the advent of Sigmund Freud and psychology, and they really realized how powerful psychology could be used to manipulate people. So,
Good.
yeah. So before that, propaganda might have been used in terms of like making your political opponent look bad, but they never used it to such a large advantage to help get people behind an effort. So from World War I on, you will see propaganda used quite heavily to get people behind a war effort, especially in World War II, things like that. And all because of psychology becoming like a new hot field. Okay? So if you have AP Psych, think about that. All right, not only do we have all these things with like propaganda and the war effort and patriotism, we also do have people who oppose the war. So we do have opposition. We did talk about some of those groups that were opposed to war because they wanted peace. So what is the government going to do for people who are opposed to the war?
Make them seem German.
Yeah, they are. And they're also going to pass legislation. Do you remember what the legislation is that they pass?
No.
Okay.
Espionage Act.
Yes, Espionage Act. And what does the Espionage Act say? What can you not do?
Oh yeah, eliminated freedom of speech.
Right, so you can't be a spy, and you cannot speak ill of the government. And they really use that last part to get a bunch of people in trouble. Remember Eugene V. Debs? We talked about him before. He was the socialist leader who ran from prison as president. Remember him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in prison because he spoke out against the war effort, and that's why he was put in prison. So we see suppression of rights happening during this time. Okay. But I want you guys to understand there's good and bad with everything. Where else do we see suppression of people's civil liberties during war before this?
Oh, during the Civil War, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus.
Right. So Lincoln kind of set the stage for presidents being able to do this. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. We also start to see the rise of racial tensions. We have the rise of anti-immigrants. Why are people going to be afraid of immigrants? What happened in Russia?
Oh.
Revolution.
Mm-hmm. And who are they going to be afraid of? Where do they think these people are going to be coming from that we're going to have a reaction to?
Eastern Europe.
Yes. And so we're going to limit those people coming in. Okay, because we think what are they going to be bringing with them if they're coming over? What are they going to bring with them?
Communism.
Yes, those
Their
communist ideologies.
Foreign filthy ideas.
Yes, foreign filthy ideas, exactly. So that leads to the first Red Scare. Okay, we are going to have another one during World War II and after. I guess this won't be the OG one. Okay, we're also going to see immigration quotas happening. We don't do that so much anymore, but back then we did, which means they're only going to allow so many people in from each country. We also see racial tensions rising between whites and African Americans. What group's going to start rising in power? Where's like a white, huh?
The KKK.
Yeah,
Rises power.
right. And we're going to see that in the 1920s. Lynching becomes an all-time high in the 1930s. Okay. We also see the eugenics movement happening. And we're going to talk about that more during the 1920s. And then we're going to also talk about progressive amendments. What are the two big progressive amendments that are during this time period?
The 18th and 19th Amendments.
Okay, what is the 18th?
18th was prohibition and 19th was women's suffrage.
Okay, good. But what does prohibition do?
It bans the sale and usage of alcohol in the United States.
Right, so no more booze, They're going to say we need the wheat for the war effort. That's their excuse. That's one of them. And why do the progressives want to get rid of booze? What does it do to people?
Make them drunk.
Yeah, but what does it
Get
make
some
them?
money.
But when they get drunk, what do they get?
Angry.
Communist ideas.
Yeah, well, that too. Well, this is according to them. Alcohol makes men angry, and you see a rise in domestic violence. So what are they trying to help get rid of?
Violence.
Yeah. Against the people who can't defend themselves, women and children. And then Nick also said the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. Why did this start to become much more of a focal point during this time?
Because more women entered the workplace, and they felt because they work, they're part of society, they should be able to get the right to vote.
Okay, so you have workplace. There's some other things too with actually part of this. What are we fighting for the world? What are we saying we're there for?
Democracy.
Right. So we're fighting for democracy and freedom, but do we have that at home?
Not really.
No.
Right, we really don't. So Alice Paul becomes one of the biggest leaders of this movement. She's college educated. She studied in Britain with the suffragists there. And she's important because she actually brought some very military type tactics home with her. Okay. So I'm going to put that on here. And then talk about those military tactics. Because you think about like tanks and stuff like that, not like that. So she helped lead groups that would chain themselves. So groups of women would chain themselves to fences, like especially in front of the White House. They also would get arrested and have hunger strikes. And all of this negative attention actually helped their cause. Because how could we treat women this way? All right, so all of these sort of types of tactics that she was using actually helped bring attention and it actually helped get the 19th Amendment passed. Okay. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about with you guys right now. Did you have any questions over any of that? Was it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about in more detail regarding World War I or any of that?
How come we see it after the into the 20s a bit? We see a die down of people not being as worried about communism.
Interestingly enough, it doesn't become that important for us because we're living the good life with consumer debt and credit, and we're going to talk about that with the 1920s later, but people are living so well that they're not afraid of people trying to turn to communism. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, when we go into the Great Depression, a lot of people will turn to labor unions because they want help and protection because they're poor and starving. And when we come out of the Great Depression and into World War II, after World War II, all of those people who were part of the labor unions in the Great Depression are going to get labeled as communists, and it's going to come back and hurt them.
Yeah.
So we kind of see Red Scare. We've come out of this really scary time period of a war. We're not sure of ourselves. We don't know what's kind of going on. People are afraid of communism, but then when things are good, it's not a problem for us, right? And then we're going to see that repeat again with World War II. When we talk about the 1920s, which I think I'll talk about next week, we're going to talk about the effects of World War I on culture in America and how it changed cultural perspectives for people. And so that is a cultural impact that we will talk about.
So labor unions and participation in them become more popular, but does things like socialism and communism become more popular during the Great Depression?
Socialism does become more popular, and so does communism, and then it'll come back to bite them afterwards because people are poor, they're struggling, they want hope, they need help. Labor unions are offering them that help. We do have labor strikes in the 1920s that we're going to talk about, but I was just trying to focus just on World War I stuff right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just curious about trends of.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm not opposed to the question. I'm just saying that I was just trying to kind of focus on this part before we talked about the 20s, because the 20s is actually more complex. Does that make sense? There's like a lot of things happening in the 20s, but I just wanted you to realize with World War I, why we get involved, impact of our involvement, and how it affects us at home as well. And also the major thing is the rise of a more influential government in people's lives and how they really take over during a wartime. Any other questions? Those are good, so. Okay, and then did you see on the classroom where I posted those discussion questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're not due until the end of next week, not this week, but next week. So just go and answer the ones on World War I. Okay?
Oh, just the World War I ones?
Yeah, because I haven't talked about the 1920s yet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, so that's why I'm saying they're not due until the following Sunday. So in 2 Sundays, they're due. But I talked about all those topics, so you should have enough to help answer those questions for just World War I, okay? Okay. And if you guys don't have any other questions, thank you for joining me. It was nice to have you guys here. And then we'll be doing this again next week, okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. See you, Ms. Swart.
Have a good day, guys.
Have a good day.
Thank you.